Okay, I'm going to give my thoughts on the Tamiya Panther D Special Edition. This one comes with the workable tracks, metal barrel, PE, and the original Panther D kit as well. So this is one of the first kits that I bought with my Patreon funding. So if you would like to help further that, there'll be a link in the description. And thanks to the people who already donate. Alright, so the kit is pretty good. Not as good as I thought it was when it started. So let me start from the beginning and I'll talk my way through it. So one of the first things that I noticed was this hole that I'm not really sure why they have there. You probably can't see, but the piece that I have doesn't quite fit the hole, and the hole wasn't cut by me. It's partially cut by me, but because there was like a connector through it, but the part that you can actually see it here, that wasn't me. So like right there were some parts like that in this kit where rough stuff happened like that. Not really sure why, but not a major thing. It's on the bottom. I don't really care. So the first thing was the suspension. Really nothing much to report. It's pretty well done. There's numerous types of swing arms. They handle it very well. They all lock straight flat down. Typical Tamiya stuff, good to go. Now in the beginning they also have you start the process, and I still don't have this glued down. Hopefully this won't mess up my grills. It looks perfect, but you can actually pull it apart at like any time. So they have you add one of these two things that locks together in the front to keep it where the plates meet smooth, so that's pretty cool. And it's pretty easy to put back down. You just have to like lock this front part down. And then there's a poly cap on the back that'll just slide right in. So I don't know if I'll ever glue it down, but you can't really fault the way that they engineered it. It's very good. The wheels I don't have glued on yet, obviously the outer ones anyway, because I'm going to use quick masks on them. The idler was incredibly complicated for a Tamiya piece, but everything has poly caps on it, so everything can be pulled off. So they've, compared to their older G kits, they've upgraded the way the stowage bends are done. They're more like Dragon, where the top piece with the clamps is like one thing that's added on, not just like a flat piece of plastic here. One fault I will give it is the jack. That is kind of a generic clamp thing. If you can see it, it just sort of sits in these U shapes. And on the real ones, there should be something that goes in front and actually holds the jack on. So I was debating fixing that, but I'm getting a little burnt out in this, so I don't think I will. Which then brings us to the tracks. Now, so what I used was the only option in the special edition kit. They come like this, if you haven't seen these already. So it's most of the track, and then this is the guide horns with two little bits that lock in, and they're pretty good, but then they do just click together. Now, when I first started making them, I was worried they'd be like the bad Bronco ones I had done, but as you can see them sitting on here, they look really good. Sag is really good. They were a little bit annoying and fiddly to make, but not too bad. Lots of cleanup, but the spots aren't in bad places. So I have some of the kit ones here. My one gripe about it is I can't use this as the spares on the side, because you can see the gap between where the piece is. There's the two spots there and the one spot there. I could try to fill it in theory, but all of my fillers died when I was moving because the trailers of my stuff were in like 30 below because I live in Wisconsin. So that's just a personal thing, but even for someone with stuff, this would be a pain for the side tracks, which if you notice I don't have any yet, and I've been going through a few different kinds. I could use Magic Tracks or Kaizen, but I've decided to just use Freewheels since I have a set of Panther D ones downstairs, so you won't see any tracks here yet. I'm just going to throw some Freewheels on there before I paint it. I have something to do for the pin. But as far as for the kit tracks, I think these are way better than the vinyl ones that came with the original release. It took a good chunk of time to make them, but apart from that, I like them. I was gonna glue them, but now I've just been away from the process so long, I'd really rather not get into it again. And they look pretty good, so maybe I'll get away with not gluing them. They're kind of fragile. When I was putting this one on, it would keep breaking in like 3 different places. And if you glue one, you're gonna have to it's better to just glue all of them instead of having like stiff spots. But I'd seen a few reviews. I'd never seen anybody have them finished and show off the way that they could move, and they're very good. So that part of the kit, special edition, I thought was fantastic. So since I hadn't done the original version of this kit, I hadn't done one with the fans and the radiators inside of the hull, which you can't see now, but that was cool. Dragon's been doing it a really long time. The way that they handled the letterbox MG port and this driver's vision port is pretty good, much more realistic than previous, obviously the old A kit from the 60s, but it's done really well. It can stay workable if you want it to. And I'm just going to leave this for the time being. I don't know if I want it open or not, but I think I'll just leave it kind of sitting there. This I modeled open. The hatches up here just come out, so either you glue them in or you glue them open. I just have them sitting there because I don't care, but if you were clever, you could glue something to the bottom of this post so that they would stay workable and not fall out. But they look good. One thing to point out at the moment is the rolled steel texture on this thing is awesome, especially on the plates like there. It's on a lot of the hatches as well. It's very pretty. One complaint though would be if you look at the periscope covers up here, they don't fit perfectly. I've got gaps everywhere in here. I'm actually going to go over this with Mr. Surfacer before I paint, because you can see right there, there's gaps all along there. None of them fit in exactly right, and it kind of annoyed me. A lot of this kit was really great, and then occasionally I would have moments like that where I'm like, well, why the hell doesn't that look right? Another thing I'd like to point out is that I've seen other builds online of this where people use these parts. It's called A46. It's meant to support the sponsons. I never found this in the box. The A sprue only went up to A45. The Panther seems fine without them, but I never saw it in the special edition box. I have no idea where that part's supposed to be. I asked some people and nobody could give me an answer, so. Alright, so the tools. I suppose I gotta talk about that. So here's the first side. Now I didn't do the, I think it's the track change cable. They give you copper wire just to wrap around the jack block. I haven't done the tow cable stuff. I have both types of things still in a bag, debating what to do about it. But as you can see, I replaced the majority of tools with kind of hybrid versions. So fire extinguisher I straight up replaced with the Dragon spare. The crank right there, if you can see it, is actually the majority of the kit part, which I broke trying to remove the kit clamp, which I didn't like any of the kit clamps, so I removed all of them. They tried to make them look like real ones, but with filled in handles, and I tried to drill that out, but it looked crappy. And I happen to have a bunch of 3D printed ones here, so I've used those in the last two builds I did. So you can't really tell anymore, but so I broke it. So then that end, the far end of the starter crank is from the old Tamiya G Panther, and then I just glued them together and slid a 3D printed tool clamp on there. It looks okay. If you look at it super close up, it's a little imperfect, but I think it'll look okay. Then the wire cutters, I've done this in the last two builds I did of Tamiya stuff. It's a hybrid Dragon wire cutter with no clamp from a Tiger 1 kit with the Tamiya handles and a 3D printed tool clamp. Now the reason is I couldn't shave off the clamp of the Tamiya kit piece because it was fine, but it had a molded on clamp I wanted removed, and the only way to have that kind of look right was to use a different spare with no clamp on it. Now the problem with that is that for whatever, I don't know why I never noticed this before, but Dragon's handles aren't correct. So if you look at this one, where the two kind of big knobs are, and if you've watched my wire cutter video, you know what I'm talking about, those are larger than the handles, but that's not where the handles end. The handles end farther up, so all of that is the kind of reddish resin-infused paper. So the Dragon ones don't have any more handle after that. They end, so they're incorrect. It's just like where those two knobs are, their handles end and there's nothing above it, which is wrong. So the Tamiya piece was actually better, but I wanted the top of the Dragon one, so I just chopped it, glued them together, which is a huge pain, and eventually got it on there. And I've done that. I did that on the Martyr 3 I just made as well. The other side was slightly less hack and slash. If you can see, the shovel is the kit piece, but I shaved off the clamp, had to cut off the knob on the end of the shovel, replace that with a Dragon shovel knob, slid a 3D printed clamp on there, and then the axe, again, shaved off the clamps, 3D printed clamp, and then I had to just make my own piece of photo etch to hold the axe up there. This, over the course of a couple nights, was a huge pain in the butt. If you're smart, you'll just go with the kit stuff, but I wanted to upgrade it myself. If you'd have just glued the kit parts on, they'd be fine. They weren't up to my personal standards, so I upgraded everything. These shirts and plate hangers are handled really well, really easy to go in. There's no way to screw it up. There's 3 different kinds. All of these are the same, and then these 2, and they have different ways of being keyed in, so you can't screw it up. You can just hang these on if you want to. I have them off right now because I want to, essentially I don't want to cover up the good track sag I got, but I might put them on. It's really, really simple. All the rest of the stuff on here is perfectly good Tamiya stuff. The way they handled this tube and like the track hangers. Now they're a little simplified compared to Dragon. If you've ever seen a Dragon Panther kit up close, they actually have holes in here with the little things that go through to hold the spare tracks on, so these are simplified. I could try to like modify this, but I'm just getting a little burnt out modifying this thing, so I'm going to leave that. A little bit simplified, but not too bad. Also my first time doing these extended front fenders, which I really liked. I'd never seen them in a kit before. Not too bad. Essentially you put a piece connected to this part underneath with the wing nuts on it, then you put this piece over top. Is super simple. There was a connection point a little too close to some really fine detail that I kind of sanded off, which I wish they wouldn't have done that, but overall I think it's really cool to have those on a kit finally. Engine deck assembly is super simple on a Panther. It's pretty much just a few vents and the door for the engine. Really not much to talk about there, like you would think it would go. Alright, so turret. Now this thing comes with the metal barrel and breech kit. So there's that stuff inside. The main parts of it are fine, really simple. Just the back plate goes onto the main molded bits and a few pieces for the mantlet. The instructions are pretty good that they give you with the breech and barrel. It has its own sheet that covers when you should kind of cut back into the original kit parts. Worked pretty well. The only complaint I would really have is that it's a little hard to mount the breech because you build all this and then you put it in from inside because you can't slide it in with the mantlet. So that's a little weird. It's hard to get straight. And I actually feel like the barrel weighs a little too heavily on the turret. It doesn't quite sit how I would like. It's a little bit front heavy. You can see the tiny little change in how much gap there is there. It's not too bad. I might steal an idea from my son and weight down the back of the turret. He had done that with a King Tiger, he did. I thought it was silly, but now it's really bugging me, so. Not much else to say about the turret. The cupola was 3 pieces, and then plus this guy, which I've left loose. The muzzle brake is terrible. Let me show you why. There's a pretty big gap in there. I'm going to hit that with Mr. Surfacer as well before I paint, but so why I think it's terrible is they have you cut the 2 halves. Even with the metal barrel, it's a 2-half plastic muzzle brake, and they, on a number of parts on these in this kit, they have extra large sprue gates that go underneath, so they'll give you direction to remove them. Here it is for the muzzle brake. You can see that there are extra spots that are where it's going to join later that you have to remove, which means you're going to have to sand them, which means inevitably you're going to get an uneven piece of plastic, which is what happened with mine. The top, luckily, is pretty good. The bottom's pretty crap. So that's a dumb way to do a muzzle brake. I wish they did it in the way Dragon did it, but I knew that going in. It's no big surprise. Now, the smoke launchers I replaced with Dragon parts, which I do on a lot of kits, which is probably going to bite me in the end because I'm taking them out of Dragon kits. So this was taken out of the Orange Box Tiger. I just didn't like how thick these parts were. There you can see the comparison. The Dragon ones are more hollow and a bit thinner. I just like them better, so I went with Dragon. So that was another Dragon thing I had replaced. So not too much, but you know, a tool here and there. And the smoke launchers always look better from Dragon. They do such a good job on theirs. But overall, the turret was fine. So then on to my last gripe here. The Photo-etch grills are absolutely terrible. Now, this is not a mystery or a surprise, but they are made out of what I would only describe as like titanium. They are unbelievably thick and hard to clean up. I'll be honest, that's more of a me problem. I don't have specialized photo-etch cutting tools. I have a hobby knife, which it broke a couple of, the blades anyway. and I have sanding sticks. I don't have good metal files. So the one way I figured out to do it eventually on the very end of these 6 pieces was, if you're going to cut out Tamiya stuff with just a hobby knife, do it as far away from the part as possible, and then just sand it all day long with a sanding stick, and you can eventually get it smooth. But what I had been doing was getting really close, like I've been taught, where you find the part and then you go in at an angle like this, and what that would do is not break, not cut it, and it would dimple the metal, and the metal's so strong you can't really bend it back so easy. So I'm not sure if it picks up in the light, but a lot of my grills have these huge dimples in them. They look really wonky because the metal's just too damn strong. I gave up at one point, and in here is the Dragon Premium Panther D grills that I went down into my stash, cut out, cleaned up, only to put them on and realize they don't fit the new Tamiya kit because they're a little bit too like thin this way on the tank. So I had made the decision to poach another kit, and then got back upstairs and realized it didn't fit, and I was like, well, I guess I'm going to have to use the wonky Tamiya one. So I did, and it went, ugh, you know. I think once paint gets on them, it'd be fine. And if I was doing more of a beat-up thing on here, I would actually just butcher them on purpose, and that wouldn't be such a big deal. But I was going to do this relatively clean, like, you know, one of the first Panthers on its way to Russia in July of '43. So that was really a stinky way to end the build, because it's the last thing I did, and it was just awful. And that's just because their PE is too thick, and everybody knows it's too thick. I'm not reporting any news here, so. In the end, it wasn't terribly expensive, this thing. And I think that parts of it I got a really good feeling where I'm like, wow, this kit really takes care of you with all this really nicely engineered stuff and cool little bonuses like the tracks and the barrel, but there was enough issues with some parts leaving gaps, like these periscope covers and this horrible muzzle brake and the stupid PE, that it kind of made it just feel like an average to meh build. But it's really nice, and it's not that expensive, so I actually really highly recommend, if you're going to do a Tamiya Panther D, just get the slightly more expensive one, because it's really cool looking. And it goes together pretty quick if you're not going to sit here and saw apart the tools like I do, but I'm insane. One I didn't mention before is the, I also had to cut this hammer and get a clamp on there. So I replaced every clamp I could replace with the correct type 2 by Zavod 3D from Shapeways, where I now carry some stuff there as well that I made. But so once I get the cables and my freewheel tracks, I'll start painting this. And I am filming all of this for a video, so I know everybody's seen the Tamiya Panther D go together, but they haven't seen me do it. And it's been nice to get back, and I used the Patreon funds to get some Tamiya stuff to try to kickstart the channel, because with all of the babies I keep having and all of the moving I keep doing, it's been really hard to keep going. But I am still around. You know, I'm also working on a video for this one. I did just strip this panel, don't worry about that, but that's the Tamiya Martyr 3, which is what I started with when I started working again. But if you want to, you know, a score review from me, this thing's a good 8 out of 10. It's pretty good. I dig the tracks. The fact that the tracks come in the kit. And the grills, if you've got like a laser to cut them with, are fine. And it's relatively good engineering.